Om Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayethi Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tena Mam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. In our last class, we saw the question that Arjuna asks: what is it that forces us as if to do things that we oftentimes don't want to do, or things that we feel are not right, and yet there is some force within us which pushes us to do things which we have no control over. And Krishna's answer to that was that force is desire. That desire is this force in our heart which seems to control our motivations, our everything that we do in life. And as I did mention, that desire sometimes gets demonized, and verses like this sometimes make us feel, because Krishna very clearly says that it's the great enemy. So to put it into context, that the desire that takes me away from the ideal, that takes me away from God, the desire that is, which makes me weaker in some way, either physically, mentally, emotionally, or morally, that desire is the enemy. Because there are other desires which are good, which make me stronger. The desire to pray, the desire to meditate, the desire to help other people, the desire to do things which are good for humanity. Those are good desires. Those desires, I wouldn't call them enemies. In fact, on the other hand, those desires are friends, because the more I engage myself in these good, positive, healthy desires, the less time I'll have to give to these other kinds of desires. So when desires are called enemy in the Gita, we have to remember that. It's not just some kind of a desire itself is a problem. In the philosophical sense, ultimately, yes. But in our day-to-day life, when we are dealing with desires, it is helpful to make that distinction. Sri Ramakrishna oftentimes called it Vidya Maya and Avidya Maya. That yes, both are Maya, both are a part of this relative world. But there are certain things in this relative world which will take me towards knowledge, towards wisdom, towards God. There are certain other things which take me away from that. And those things which take me toward God, he called it Vidya Maya. Those things that take me away from God, he calls it Avidya Maya. So good desires are a part of Maya, but Vidya Maya. And these negative, unhealthy desires, which make me forget my ideal, those belong to Avidya Maya. So now we'll begin today on verse number 40. Indriyani mano buddhihi asyadhishthanamuchyate etair vimohayatyesha jnanamavritya dehinam. The senses, the mind, and the intellect are said to be its abode. Covering knowledge through these, it dilutes the embodied person. So if desire is the enemy, then it's good to ask, where is this desire located? Because it's like this. When you want to meet some good person, to meet somebody, you need to know where they are staying, where they are located. Similarly, if the law enforcement think that there is some criminal somewhere, hiding somewhere, then the first thing they want to know is, where is the location? Where is this enemy hiding? Because only when I know where the enemy is, then I can go and try to finish off that enemy. So if desire is the enemy, where is it located? And Krishna says, the senses, the mind, and the intellect are said to be the abode of desire. And desire can be found in the senses, in the mind, and in the intellect. And what does it do? Covering knowledge through these. It covers our wisdom, or our viveka buddhi, our ability to see things clearly, the discernment that we have to a lesser or greater degree. This desire comes and covers these. It dilutes the embodied person. We are the embodied people. The reality, the divine, which is now enclosed in this body, that's who we are. And so the abode, or the where these desire is located, is in the senses, the mind, and the intellect. Now when it says through these, what does it really mean? It simply means that as long as I'm identified with the senses, the mind, and the intellect, I am in the realm of desires. Not to put too fine a point on it, but just to kind of know where it's located philosophically. We saw that the basic premise of the Gita is that there is only this one divine reality, infinite reality pervading everything. So there is really just one. Now, something seems to have happened by which this one is no longer one. Somehow these many have appeared from this one. Sometimes theistically people speak in terms of the process of creation. From God, the world has come and so on. And there are many different ways of looking at it. But somehow this one existence has got broken up, divided, fractured into these multifarious things of this world. And among the way how the many came from one gets described in books is that the first thing that happened was ignorance. And ignorance that I am one. It's like this. In order for me to feel I'm someone else, I first need to forget who I am right now. If I know who I am, then I cannot mistake myself for someone else. And so forgetting who I am is really what ignorance is. So just imagine this one reality somehow forgets that I am this one reality. And so, of course, then if the oneness is forgotten, it just then perceives the manifold, the many everywhere. When its immortality is forgotten, it becomes a mortal creature. When its divinity is forgotten, it becomes a human creature. And so, what makes us human, as of course, clearly, what makes a dog and what makes us a human is, whatever is the being inside the dog is in a dog's body. And the being inside this is in a human body. So, from a Vedantic perspective, the dog is not essentially different from a human being. They are just the same reality. The same being is in two different containers, a dog-shaped container and a human-shaped container. That's all. So right now we think of ourselves as human beings because we are in a human body. But we know we are not just the body, that beyond the body there is a subtler dimension within us. And that then includes the senses, the mind, the intellect, and so on. But all of these things have primarily come from me forgetting myself, from that ignorance. And so, through these, through the senses, the mind, and the intellect means, it's when that ignorance, that avidya, ajnana, that occurs, it is then that desire takes hold of us. Which kind of makes sense. If sometimes, sometimes we have had a heavy meal, then we generally don't feel immediately feel hungry. Because somehow that heaviness in the stomach, we will know, I can't eat anything more right now. But there are some kind of illnesses where people may not feel what's happening inside. They may be forgetful, and sometimes it does happen. And people in severe dementia and stuff like that, they might just had a meal and they think, oh, I'm hungry, I want to eat more. And so that self-forgetfulness sometimes makes us see things that shouldn't or not really there. And so the senses perceive the object, the mind longs for them, and the intellect then thinks about them. And all of these things ultimately draws us out. And through that attachment, through that anger and desire and wanting, we then forget our main goal of life, main purpose of life. And that's why this verse points out that the location of that desire is in the senses, the mind, and the intellect. Verse 41. Tasmat tvam indriyanyadau niyamya bharatarshava papmanam prajahi yenam jnana vijnana nashanam. Therefore, O best of the Bharata race, controlling the senses at the outset, kill the sinful thing which destroys knowledge and realization. So it's referring to Bharat Rishabha really literally means the bull of the Bharata race. Now, sometimes if you call some human being a bull, that might not be seen as a compliment. But here it's really not to be taken literally. It simply means the best of that dynasty, of that race. So he says, the best of the Bharata race, what shall we do? How can we kill this desire? He says, controlling the senses at the outset. You see, sometimes they say that a stitch in time saves 9. This was something we grew up hearing from our childhood. That's even if there is a problem, if we nip the problem in the bud, nip it in the beginning itself, it is much easier to deal with it. The more you wait, the more problematic the problem becomes. Or it's like there is a minor cut. And then if you immediately attend to it, do something about it, it probably heals very quickly. But if you allow the wound to fester and to become worse, then it becomes a more serious problem. And therefore, the controlling of the senses, there is at least where I was growing up in India, there was this idea that religion and spirituality, it's not for young people. That's something when you are retired, when you have more time, that's the time to become religious. And don't waste your time. So sometimes if young people became too much interested in the religion or spirituality, oftentimes the family got worried. They said, whoa, this person now, what will happen to this person? And so to kind of, it has some sense in the sense that for most people, religion is a kind of, it's more like what we might call a pious religiosity, which primarily involves attending some pujas, observing some festivals, and in general being good people. And so, and clearly, it seems as if you will have more time to do all these things when you are retired. But understanding of spirituality, not as simply some kind of just being pious about something, but it's a dynamic spirituality, that is something that needs to be practiced, not something to be just believed in, not just a few observances. Then, the earlier we start, the better off we are. The example often given in books is of a potter. If you're making, say, clay pots, then you can give whatever shape you want to that pot only when the clay is tender and soft. Once you kind of bake it and it's cooked and it's hard, then you can't do anything about it. And sometimes we have seen from our own lives the kind of the way of thinking of the mind, the kind of biases and prejudices we accumulate in life. Many of these things have happened at a very impressionable stage of our life. And that's why, especially everywhere in all countries, even the problem is not simply modern, it's ancient and modern as well. That special attention should be paid to this new generation, the growing generation, because they will be the future of the world ahead. And at that impressionable age, the kind of ideas they get, the kind of attitudes they are fed into by the media, by the environment around them, it's possible to change. It's possible to change at any stage in life. But it becomes more and more difficult as the mind kind of becomes baked in a certain way of thinking. So changing is possible at any stage, but it becomes more difficult in later stages. And that's why controlling the senses at the outset would mean, if as early as possible in life, if you have understood the value of restraint, of self-discipline, then that becomes a blessing all through life. It's becomes more difficult to then start at later stages in life. And that's why it says, controlling the senses at the outset, ado means in the beginning. Kill this sinful thing which destroys knowledge and realization. Jnana, Vijnana, Nashanam. So there are these two words. Jnana means knowledge. Vijnana, that is same, the word jnana, with the prefix V, with the Vishesh jnana, like a special knowledge. So knowledge and special knowledge. Jnana, Vijnana. So what's the difference between knowledge and special knowledge? Knowledge is really knowledge. So when you read the commentaries and look at the meaning, intent of this verse, what they often say is that there are, and we have seen this before, that there is knowledge acquired through books, knowledge acquired through the intellect, which is mediated through our mind and the senses. That is knowledge. But there is knowledge which bypasses all of these, and gets a direct experience. Anubhuti, in sometimes the word used in many Sanskrit language. And so it's a little bit like reading about spirituality in books, and we get some idea, some knowledge, but then actually practicing it and experiencing it directly in our lives. So Jnana Vijnana means, and that's how it's been translated in many books, as knowledge and realization. So it is this desire, when the force of desire is strong, it's not restrained, it's not controlled at the outset, then it covers up knowledge as well as realization. In other words, even if you have read something, when we mostly need that knowledge, we will not remember it. And of course, there is no way of getting realization if my mind is filled with desire. In the Mahabharata, there is the story of Karna, who was a very brave soldier, very brave, extremely brave, and he was not in any way less capable than Arjuna, probably more capable. In fact, he was really Arjuna's eldest brother. But we won't go into the details, but at some point in his life, he had received a kind of a curse from his teacher, saying that you have all the skills and all the knowledge that is needed to succeed in a battlefield. But when you most need this knowledge, that is the time you will forget it. And in that kind of a climactic scene in that book, when there is this battle going on between Karna and Arjuna, and then the story goes that one of the wheels of his chariot kind of sinks inside, then he gets down, and Arjuna is about to release some big astra. That time Karna, theoretically he had that knowledge of what he should do. But at that moment, it kind of a momentary forgetfulness. And of course, that doesn't bode well. He's killed. In some sense, every one of us is like Karna a little bit in life. A lot of times, most of us have read a little bit or more of these books about spirituality, about Vedanta, and about life in general. Most of us kind of know what's the right thing and what's not the right thing. And at the same time, we will see those occasions in life when we say something inappropriate or do something inappropriate or think something inappropriate. It's not because we didn't know it was inappropriate, but at that moment, we just blanked out. At that moment, it was not working. And so we do something, and later on then we feel guilty and we regret it and so on. But it's because of that momentary self-forgetfulness. And that is why it says this thing which destroys knowledge and realization. That the force of desire is so strong that no matter how many books a person may have read, all of that can get forgotten. And therefore this emphasis on looking at these powerful forces within us, the desires that's springing in our heart, looking at them, not impulsively acting upon them immediately, but looking at them carefully and ask ourselves, what is this desire? Will acting upon it is good for me or not good for me? And if the answer is, yes, it's good for me, by all means I should say yes. Or if my mind says, no, this is probably not good for me, then I should have the strength to say no to it. That is what discernment means. That is what Viveka is. Verse 42. The question is, whose help can we take to destroy this desire, to kill this desire? The answer is, Indriyani paranyahu indriyebhyah param manaha manasastu para buddhihi yo buddher paratastu saha. The senses are said to be superior to the body, the mind is superior to the senses, the intellect is superior to the mind, that which is superior to the intellect is the Atman. So here we find a kind of a staged ways that we speak about the senses, the body, the senses, the mind, the intellect, and so on. So they are not all of them equal in some sense, that one is superior than the other. So more than this physical body, the senses are more superior. More than the senses, the mind is superior to the senses. The buddhi, the intellect is superior to the mind. And then the Atman is superior to all of them. So what does the word superior here mean? And simply, there are three things. That it is more sukshma, more subtle, it is, in Sanskrit they say antarastha, it is more interior. And third, vyapitva, it's more pervasive. So the more we know that more tangible something is, the less pervasive it is. I mean, just take a simple example between solid, liquid, and gases. So, solid, it has a definite form. The more it, you melt it, if there's a metal, and you melt it in a liquid form, it can become more pervasive because it can take the shape and form of the container. But once it goes into a gaseous state, then of course it becomes even more pervasive. So the more subtle something becomes, the more pervasive it is. And so what is said here is, why are the senses superior to the body? Because they are more subtle, they are more interior, and then they are more pervasive. And that's true then for the buddhi and so on. And then ultimately, the Atman, the spirit, which is the subtlest of all. There's, compared to the Atman, compared to the self, the real self, which is pure consciousness, everything material is gross. Everything material is external. And it can never fill everything because it is material, it's still limited in some way. And that's why if I want to conquer the hold that the senses, the mind, and the intellect have on me, then I should go to someone who is superior to all of them. And that superior thing is the deepest core of our own being. And that's the Atman, the self, the seat of divinity in our heart, the God within our heart, or the pure consciousness within. Verse 43. Evam buddhe param buddhva samstabhyatmanam jahi shatrum mahabaho kamarupam durasadam. In this way, knowing the Atman who is superior to the intellect and restraining the self by the self, O mighty armed, kill this enemy in the form of desire which is difficult to conquer. So, what is the meaning of restraining the self by the self? How can you restrain the self by the self? So, the English translation can be confusing because the Sanskrit itself uses the same words. Atmana, Atmanam. So, it means control the Atman by the Atman. So, something that I have mentioned on earlier occasions as well. Atman is not some kind of a technical term. Atman simply means the self. And so every time you see the word Atman in Sanskrit, don't immediately jump to the conclusion that it means that spirit or that pure consciousness. It simply means self. In other words, if I look upon the body as the self, then for me, at that time, the body is the Atman. Because I'm treating it as if it is me. And that's what most of us are doing most of the time. I can say, I'm sitting here, I'm talking to you. Now, what is sitting here is the body. So if I truly believe I'm sitting here, I'm kind of treating the body as if it were the self. And so lifting the self by the self really means lifting the lower self by the higher self. And in one sense, we could say both. The mind also can be treated as self, because sometimes we just say, I'm happy or I'm sad. Now, these are all qualities, attributes connected to the mind. It's the mind that gets happy. It's the mind that gets sad. But I just feel I'm happy, I'm sad. So again, that selfhood kind of gets projected onto the mind. Now, the mind, although we are kind of using it singular, it just seems like it's a monolithic something called the mind. But it is not so. The mind is, it's a think about a huge lake. Now, if it's a kind of a small pond, generally you will find there isn't much variation in the quality of water in a small pond. Pretty much it's all same. But if you say go to Lake Michigan or some huge lake, then it's possible that in these large bodies of water, some sections of it may be, oh, don't go and swim in that part of the lake. That's pretty muddy and not good. Maybe you go to the northern side and then you might find it's good. The water is transparent and so on. So we might find, although the lake is one, some parts of it may be better than others. And that's the analogy often given in thinking in terms of the mind. Our mind is not just one monolithic whole, that the mind already has at least these two parts. There is this, if you think of the mind in terms of a lake, there is this one part of a mind, the water is very clear, wonderful, it's beautiful. You just can go and dip and just drink it straight away. That will be perfectly drinking water. And then this other part of the mind is pretty muddy, not good at all. Now, our mind is a little bit like that. We see that that part of the mind which is filled with very limited aspirations, which is just filled with desires for these perishable things of this world. That's that muddy part of that lake. But then there is this nobler part in the mind, something that the idealistic part in our heart, something that sometimes we speak about it as the voice of conscience, or there is something within. I mean, a lot of time when we have these inner conflicts, it's really between these two parts of the same mind. It's like the dilemmas that people have, the inner tug of war that often occurs. One part of the mind says, do this is really good for you. And the other part says, no, I want to do something else because this is much more fun. And the other part says, no, but this is something different. And so that part of the mind, in fact, one would say that our interest in spiritual life, that you have chosen to come and spend time thinking about Gita on a Wednesday evening. There are 100 other things you could have done at this time. But you felt, instead of doing all of those things, I'm just going to come here and listen to Gita. And there is something, again, what is it that made you choose to do this instead of many other things? And one would say that if there is this part of me that says, no, it's a time well spent if you go on thinking about the inner life, something about transcendence, not just about these daily stuff that keeps on changing day by day. So that part of the mind which is telling me to do what is right, what is good, we could say that's the awakened part of the mind. And this other part of the mind, which is driven by my desires, my ambitions, something that ultimately becomes the cause of all the stress and anxiety and worry and pain and suffering in life. That's the kind of an unawakened part, which is just controlled by my impulses. And so lifting the self by the self really means it's this awakened part of me, awakened part of my mind, which is trying to lift that other part and say, hey, stop doing that. Now just think about it this. Now this awakened part and the unawakened part, they are not fixed entities. that it's possible to widen the awakened part. It's like a lake, which is good, say 10% of the lake water is really good, 90% is problematic. Now, it doesn't have to be that way. People can take some purification projects, do something by which we can say, oh, now we have undertaken this project, we are trying to clean the water of this lake. And so 10 years ago, it was only 10% was good, 90% was bad. We have been working at it hard. Now 30% is good, 70% is still problematic. We can do that with our mind. The good news is every one of us has an awakened part of the mind. There is this higher mind, without which, if it were not there, you wouldn't have even thought about spirituality, wouldn't even have thought about any of these things. The fact that we find this meaningful means there is this awakened part. Now, all spiritual practices do first, yes, we are praying to God and meditating on God and all of that. But the first thing that is required in order to make headway in spiritual life is to increase the power of this awakened part, awakened mind. Because this awakened mind has to lift that. So this poor little 10%, lifting the 90% is a hard job. So the more you empower this awakened mind, then the easier it becomes to lift the self by the self. And that is what is said here. Ultimately, when the complete mind becomes awakened, then the sun is about to rise. Then, if we want to become enlightened, not just play at spirituality, but truly become enlightened beings, then the goal is that 100% of my mind has to be awake. Right now, a little bit is awake. We don't know. I wish there was some kind of a test to find out how much percent I'm awake and how much not. Doesn't matter. Through our own experience, this self-appraisal if we have about our own life, we will know that today I'm a little bit more awake than what I was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. That means the awakened part of my mind is becoming larger. But to keep that goal at the mind, ultimately, we want the whole mind to become awakened. But once the whole mind becomes awake, it becomes transparent. And then the reflection of the Atman becomes clear in it. And then, of course, then all the problem is solved. Then you don't need to study the Gita anymore after that, because the purpose has been served. So we'll stop here. With this, we come to the end of this third chapter of Karma Yoga. If you have any ideas, comments, questions.
Pranam Maharaj. When he taught us the Katha Upanishad, that time we learned about two Atmans. One is Jivatma and another is Paramatma. Now, I see that mind is powerful than senses because it's more subtle. Intellect is superior to mind, that's much more subtle. Then Atma is subtlest. So that means we have to go beyond the Atma.
No, you are the Atma. No question of going beyond.
Yeah. So to get the 100% pure in the mind, then I can get to the final.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, comparatively, it is that actually the Atman, although it's kind of put the body, the senses, the mind, the buddhi, and Atman, comparing all of these things with the Atman is like really comparing apple to oranges. They are not really same, but these are much more gross. They are material. Atman is spiritual. In that sense, it is the subtlest of all.
Yeah.
But the Atman is unique, so it is really incomparable in that sense. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi. I don't know if this will be a simple thing to answer, but if the Atman is the self, and I guess oneself is comprised of all of the things that have occurred in one's life, meaning that kind of informs one's sense of self, then how do we transcend these things to identify with the Atman in like the spiritual sense, if that makes sense?
Yeah, good. The idea is that all these other things that have happened in our life and all these other notions of the self we have, they became possible only because the Atman forgot it's the Atman. It's a little bit like when I go to sleep and I fall asleep, then I forget who I am. In deep sleep, I no longer know I'm lying in my bed. Maybe in a dream, then I'm somewhere else. I've forgotten who I am and where I am. So, in order for me to create the dream world, and I might have a very different identity in my dream, I become a part of the dream world because I don't even know it's a dream world in dream. It all appears very real. But all of that became possible. All of those different notions of self in the dream became possible only when I forgot my real self who is asleep on the bed. And that's the idea here. The Atman is all that exists. Suppose if the Atman were to go to sleep and forget I am the Atman, then in the Atman's dream, it will become this body, the mind, and the senses. And then, of course, get involved with this world and then deal with this world with all its challenges. And there is no real complete solution in this world itself because the reality is this is the Atman's dream. So if the Atman has to get back to being the Atman has to wake up. And so that waking up of the Atman becomes easier when this mind that this Atman has acquired in this dream, when that mind becomes more clear, more awakened, that wakes up the Atman. So in that way we can compare the real self and then these kind of pseudo selves with which we are dealing on a daily basis. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Just continuing on the same train of thought, how I think of it is if at all times we remember that we are not the body but the soul or the consciousness or the Atman, and that we forget the true nature of the Atman, which is pure and beautiful and blissful and peaceful and joyful. And the whole, like Swami Vivekananda said, it's unveiling the human mind to manifest the divinity within you. So we come to Gita class to remind ourselves that we are not the body but the soul.
Yeah.
And the soul has these beautiful characteristics that we keep forgetting because our sensory stimulation is so much that we remain in the sensory level of existence.
Yeah.
And we don't, and that's why we try to meditate, to go within and remember and try to manifest those soulful qualities.
Right.
So
That's true. I mean, the problem is forgetfulness. And the only way to overcome forgetfulness is to send these self-reminders more and more often so that we will forget less.
yeah.
Good. Yeah. Yeah.
Namaskar. So one of the interesting takeaways from me from last time and today is that if there is a habit you have which may not be good for you, the best way of weakening it is to deny it again and again. And gradually, as you said last time, it goes away. I can see how that will work for sort of conscious desires, but there are some cases where something is instinctive. I'll give you an example using Bengali mishti if I could. Let's say I'm having lunch, and at the end of it, the waiter comes and says, "Would you like a rasgulla?" And at that point, I'm consciously eating and I'm thinking about it. So I can consciously think about it and say, no, it's not, I've eaten too much or I'm overweight, which I am, so I can say, no, I should not. But the flip side of that is if I come home and I'm very tired and very hungry, or just tired and stressed, I might open the fridge and say, oh, there's rasgullas here. And I could eat 4 of them and not think about it. And then later on, I'll be like, wait, why did I do that? It's not good for me so much. So how do you intervene when it is instinctive and you have not, it doesn't even come into the conscious mind as you're doing it potentially?
I mean, good. It's a good observation. I wouldn't so much call it instinct. I would just say there are times in life when we are on autopilot. It's just mechanical. And the answer is simply not to think anything mechanically. The more alert we can be. I mean, all of these, I mean, even what many of the Buddhist teachers nowadays have popularized, the idea of mindfulness. That really means not doing anything mechanically. Because the mind that we have is the same mind that does ordinary things as well as important things. And what happens is, we sometimes might think, oh, brushing my teeth or taking a shower, I do that every day. Why do I have to be so alert about it? Those are the things I can do mechanically. The problem is that if I train my mind to do nothing mechanically, then it will remain alert even with these small little things of daily life, and that habit will continue when I'm sitting for prayer or meditation or do some important job at your workplace. But if the mind is accustomed to doing things mechanically, even if there are like just simple things, then that tendency of the mind to do things mechanically will extend to things where it shouldn't be doing things mechanically. It's like, this is the example that often comes to my mind when I was getting my driving lessons when I was this thing. So one of the things that the teacher was saying was, well, when you have to turn left, then of course you put the left signal, and then when you turn right, you turn the right signal, or turn your right signal this way. And I should have simply kept quiet and just followed his instructions. But then I asked him the question. I said, that's correct. But I said, what if there is no, I'm not turning, there is not a road crossing. If the road itself is going left, do I still have to show the signal or not? Because there is just one road and then the road is turning left. And his answer was really amazing. I really am very grateful for that answer. He said, even if the road is turning left, it's still fine to give the left signal. You're not doing anything illegal or wrong by showing the left signal. And he says, perhaps the car behind you may have come from a different city. You may be from here, you know the road turns left. That person may not know. So if you are showing the signal, it might help the car behind to know that there is a left turn there. But the more important thing, he said, was that once that becomes a habit, every time you are steering wheel. When you're turning this way, automatically your hand goes up. Every time you're turning this way, it automatically goes down. Then you are saving that split second before deciding, oh, should I be showing the signal or not showing the signal? We don't even need to think that. Just make it a part of your muscle memory. And I like that because similarly, do I have to always tell my mind, oh, this particular activity needs alertness, be alert now. This particular activity is ordinary, do it mechanically. We don't need to take all that trouble. We just train the mind, do everything in life with alertness. Then the kind of instinctive responses you see, they may not go away totally. We are still imperfect beings at many levels, but at least the mistakes will become reduced considerably, because this forgetfulness is really the problem. And so being alert is the only solution to that one. Yeah. Yeah.
Swamiji, you spoke about mind needs to be awake. So now I have the mind which is lower mind. To understand the Atman, my mind needs to be awake. If you're saying that I feel like I'm separating myself and Atman, because Atman is beyond mind. So how could I awake my mind to know Atman? With whose mind?
No, that's why I said that the mind is not one monolithic whole, that a part of the mind is already awake in us. In every one of us, a little part of the mind is already awake. The rest of the mind is not yet, it's still sluggish, it's still kind of drowsy. And that's why lifting the self by the self means that part of the mind which is awake is trying to wake up the other part which is sluggish. And therefore the goal is to awaken a larger part of my mind, so that sluggish part will become smaller and smaller. And ultimately the goal is the entire mind to become awakened. And when that happens, realization will occur. Okay. Yeah.
Pranam Swamiji. I'm still unable to reconcile ignorance. If ignorance is something that veiled consciousness, the Atman, the one true existence, and it appears and terminates, then it is apart from the consciousness. So it cannot be.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it exactly?
So it never happened. And that's why the whole thing is as if. See, if it really happened, then there is actually a real problem. If it happened once, then it could happen again. Then there will be no moksha, permanent moksha. And so the Gita says, this is what seems to have happened. If something impossible happens, then it cannot happen really. But it can happen unreally. It's like, is it possible now for me to suddenly develop 2 wings and start flying about? No, it cannot happen. But then I can fall asleep in my dream, I might develop 2 wings and fly. So, has anything changed? No, I'm just only dreaming, nothing has changed. So, impossible things can seem possible only if they did not really happen. And that's how the Atman becoming these many things did not really happen. But we are now trying to figure out, oh, all this world has come, how did it come? And so we are kind of making up this story. Now we might say, well, what's the point? Anyone can make up any story. The idea is the story will have value only if I have some way of imagining how this may have come, then I will have a way to know how to get out of it. So if I've got into a mess, the first thing to know is how I got into it. Because if I know the way I got into it, then I know how to get out of it. And so if I think of this as, oh, this is a dream that has occurred, then I know the solution is then to wake up. And so waking up is what? And the word Buddha means the one who is awake. And so that's the goal, to wake up. Then all this dream will vanish.
Thank you, sir.
Okay? Yeah. Yeah.
Namaskar, Swamiji. Swamiji, my question is related to the Rasagulla question. So I tend to, I noticed this pattern. I thought it was unconscious eating, but I actually realized that it's not. So similar to him, when I get stressed, I really enjoy eating chocolate. And it makes me feel...
a lot of people in
Yeah, it makes me feel great. So then I noticed my trigger was stress. I would open the fridge and I would eat the chocolate. I noticed that was a trigger. But even as a spiritual seeker, I kind of accepted that. And I was like, I'm okay. I'm okay eating the chocolate.
There are very few problems in the world that are not solved by chocolate. So I think it's okay. I mean, eating chocolate is nothing wrong about it.
But my question is, like, when I'm getting stressed, if I'm turning to chocolate rather than Sri Ramakrishna, or like, is that a habit I need to fix? Or is it perfectly okay for me to enjoy my chocolate and...
Yeah. I mean, if chocolate is able to remove your stress, and that's fine. I mean, not to kind of be under the illusion that chocolate is a permanent solution to a problem. To kind of, so long as we acknowledge it's a quick fix. I have a stress now. If thinking about Ramakrishna, thinking about spirituality can remove stress, then maybe you don't need it. But if you feel, oh, that's going to take a much longer time, and if you want a quick remedy for it, go for chocolate. So long as it doesn't create any other health issues or anything, obviously. But not even to think that, oh, this will solve all problems for all time. That's so long as we are aware of its limitations. I mean, sometimes people get headache or feverish, they take a Tylenol. They don't take it to the idea that never in my life I'm going to get a headache again. It's like, yeah. So yeah, chocolate is fine. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Namaskar, Swamiji. So, Buddha is enlightened. Buddha is enlightened, that is what we say. Sri Ramakrishna is enlightened, that is what we say. Sri Krishna himself says that he is everywhere, he is the consciousness. If all of this, Jesus is enlightened, whatever we can think of the God, those are enlightened, then why is it I am still seeing it then? If everything is enlightened, all of these are enlightened, they were enlightened, or is it just because I am seeing all of these things, my world, so they are just part of my world's some words or stories. What is the truth?
Yeah, it's a good question. The idea is, yes, Buddha and all these great ones were enlightened, but their enlightenment doesn't solve your problem. You can't say, oh, Buddha is enlightened, so I don't need to do anything. But through Buddha's enlightenment, the path he showed, the teachings he gave, what we find is, if I try to practice those teachings in my own life, then I can be enlightened too. But yes, ultimately, since everything is a projection of my mind, then yes, it's possible to see that all of these things, all of the great ones we read about, they are objects of my perception. Some of them are historical, some of them are mythological, some of them are my contemporaries. And I just have to see this is the world I'm experiencing, the world in which a lot of people are ignorant, the world in which I know some great people have come and become enlightened. Me now, in my present state, what should I do to become enlightened myself? Yeah.
Actually, so that raises another question, that how to believe that whatever they said, that because again the question comes, right, if they are enlightened, then the consciousness should be at the stable level, isn't it? So ignorance shouldn't come, but the ignorance is there because I myself is experiencing.
Yes, sit down. It's a little bit like this. Say you fall asleep and you are dreaming. And then in your dream world, you find a lot of people in the dream world. They are part of your dream. Everyone is a part of your dream because you are the one who is dreaming it. It's your dream. Now, in your dream, you see some stupid people and you see some great people. Because, again, the world is different. Just like people are different in this world, people are different in the dream world too. So let's say in your dream, someone comes and tells you, this is not real, this is a dream. That person is telling the truth. Although that person is a part of your dream, that person is telling you the truth. Now it's up to you whether to believe that person or not. And if you say, oh, I think I believe it, so what shall I do? Then that person says, be alert. Don't think that this is real. The real you is asleep. Wake up. So if you believe that person, then you will do what that person says and you will wake up. And then you find this whole thing disappears. But if you feel, who knows, this person may be just telling stories, then you will not follow that person. Then you will continue sleeping and the dream will continue. And that's what people are doing. I mean, it's not like, the great ones have come. There is a Buddha, there is Jesus, there is Ramakrishna, and all these great ones have come. Not everyone is believing, oh, they are all great people. A lot of people don't even read these books. A lot of people might say, who knows? There are people, there are atheists, there are agnostics, who don't believe it. And so then, according to this way of thinking, they will continue to sleep, continue to dream. But those who believe, and again, it's not blind belief. It's not just blind faith. Oh, I'm just going to follow this person. What we have seen through actual experience is that when we follow the teachings of this great one, actually live the way they ask us to live, we are able to see tangible changes in our life, real transformation in our life. And that deepens our faith. That I'm not just in some la-la land believing anything, that this is something that actually works. And so when we see that, it's like this, if you go to a doctor and you don't know, this is the first time you go to a doctor, you don't know how good that doctor is, and you tell your problem and the doctor prescribes some medicine to you. Now, you have to have some faith in the doctor that I can trust the judgment of the doctor, otherwise you won't even take that medication. But if you have that initial say, okay, I'm going to give it a try. And then you start taking that medication. And then within, say, 1 or 2 or 3 days, you're not become fully all right yet, but you begin to feel a little better. Then you say, oh, I think the diagnosis is good. Maybe the doctor prescribed the right medicine. It's helping me. And then you continue doing that and you become fully well. So with these teachings, it's like that. We have to have some initial, at least enough faith to accept these teachings as a working hypothesis. But be alert that yes, I'm going to follow this teaching and see whether it actually works for me. And if you find some change which is for the better, then you say, well, it's working. This medicine is working. Okay, last follow-up, no more. Okay, come on.
So the question she asked about the veil of the ignorance. Okay. So the veil of the ignorance in our daily life also we observe when we read a book. So now the book is nothing but it's all imagination, but we can take one character and we can feel it, and we can, for a moment, it's like we are in that story. But actually nothing is happening. Means nothing is happening. It's just a story. It's everything in imagination. So I'm just thinking, so what if this is just a story, and for this me, there is no end, just it will just end, and there is no anything beyond it. That could be possible, right? Because you are saying that consciousness is already there. It's consciousness
No,
is
it's
already
not there.
It's
You are consciousness.
I'm
It's not like floating somewhere.
No, means consciousness means the veil of ignorance means, I don't know. I
Okay,
I'm
think
confused.
about it. Okay, give a thought. Yeah, it can be sometimes confusing because we are kind of putting in so many ideas from so many different ways. It all needs to somehow. Sometimes these ideas need time to gel inside. So give it some thought. That yes, ultimately it's all a story. It's one dream being removed by another dream. It's like sometimes in olden days, if a thorn went into your foot, then usually you said, okay, get another thorn to remove the first thorn. So it's a little bit like that. If someone's, I'll tell you one final story and then we stop. It's this, one person was going with some tiny basket in hand, and someone asked him, what is in this basket? And then he said, I'm seeing hundreds and thousands of snakes everywhere. And the only way I can protect myself, there is this other one creature called mongoose. But they're said to be like a traditional enmity with snakes. And the mongoose are the only one who can deal with snakes. So this person says, I'm carrying this mongoose in my basket. So if any of these snakes attacks me, I've got to release this mongoose and protect myself. But the other person said, there were no snakes. This person was just imagining. So the other person said, what are you saying that there are hundreds of snakes everywhere? I don't see any snakes. There are no snakes here. That's just your imagination. Then this person opened the basket and said, the mongoose also is an imagination. So an imaginary snake can only be overcome by an imaginary mongoose. An imaginary illness can only be removed by an imaginary medicine. A dream illness can be removed only by a dream medicine. A dream thirst can be removed only by a dream water. And so yes, it's a story. But that story can be only removed by this other story. Think about it. Because now you have almost 5 to 6 weeks to think about it. Because this is our last class before we close for the summer recess. And so somehow it all worked out well. So we have come to the conclusion of the chapter 3. So when we meet in mid-September, we will begin with chapter 4. So you have quite a lot of time to figure this all out. Okay? Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhu.